Okay, so this morning I'm really pleased to be having a chat with Ben Lewis, who is CEO of Young Voices, an organisation that stages the largest children's choir concerts in the world. Thanks, Ben. Very good to see you this morning.
Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. For those who don't know, can you explain what Young Voices is and the sort of the story behind its creation?
Sure. Well, we've been going 27 years now,
Wow.
and we fundamentally, as you said, we put on the largest children's choir concerts in the world, and that's in cities across the world, but mainly we started in Dublin in 1996, and fundamentally what we do is we bring all the primary schools together in each city and the surrounding area, and we teach them all their music. So it's a choral event, so we send each music teacher a music pack which they all learn in their own schools, and then on the big day we bring them all together in these huge arenas like the O2 or Manchester Arena or the NEC in
Amazing.
Birmingham, and form these mega choirs of up to 9,000 children each day. And then all their mums and dads come. We have special guests, live band, and we put on a huge concert. And we do that in the UK. We do a lot of shows in kind of January, February time. So this last January, February, we just did 28 shows, which was nearly about 180,000 children in total across the UK. And then we do shows around the world. We've done in South Africa, Trinidad, Germany, America. And so, yeah, it's a great thing. And the way it started, fundamentally back in, it's a family business. So my dad and my brother and I started Young Voices. But before that, my dad, totally by accident, it was put on the largest male voice choir in the world, which was in Cardiff Arms Park, where we grew up in Cardiff, with Tom Jones and Shirley Bassey, off the back of it, which happened off the back of a rugby match in Wales where we got beaten by 30 points by the French. And his best friend, who was over in Wales, who then lived in Florida, said, the rugby's terrible, but the singing, which Wales has always been famous for, that's not very good either. So you need to go and sort it out. And my dad had a few connections and was one of those people that would just make something happen. And he ended up putting a choir on the pitch for the first time it had been done. He had a choir on the pitch to sing the anthem for the next game. And he then split that choir into the crowd. He got them all tickets to be in the crowd and get everybody else singing throughout the game. And off the back of that rugby match, they said, you need to put on a concert, which ended up turning into this huge spectacle that was on TV. And Tom Jones phoned him from LA to say, I want to be in your concert. And my dad actually hung up the phone on Tom Jones because he didn't actually believe it was
Because it was him.
Yeah. And he phoned back and said that's not the first time that's happened. So
no, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that's how it all started.
An amazing story.
Yeah, and then that was obviously with adults, and then, as I said, in Dublin in 1996, that's when a lot of schools wrote in and said, you're putting on these adult concerts, but what about doing something for schools? And we had one of those conversations, and it was all around music education and the fact that primary school music was always a bit flat.
That
it was either a recorder recital or Away in a Manger, and it was a little bit. So we thought, well, actually it would translate really well for schools, and we did it as a one-off in Dublin in 1996 with 3,000 children for Dublin, and that was the start of Young Voices. And we have never done an adult concert since that day. So, yeah.
Gosh, what a lovely story. And Ben, before you were involved, I know it's family-run business, but did you did you do anything before that?
Well, yeah,
totally different line of business.
No, I wouldn't say a totally different line of business. So I studied in Manchester and then in Cape Town, and certainly in both of those, music has always been my passion since I was a teenager. So I was a DJ and a
Okay.
vinyl collector from kind of 14, 15. And so when I went to South Africa, I was putting on parties and DJing and collecting music and kind of around artists. And we ended up putting on a Young Voices in South Africa in Cape Town.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I would say even then, the business was kind of part of what I did, and
Yeah. So
and
you were always
and
going down that road, really.
always going down that road. But it's weird how when you're a teenager, kind of Young Voices,
Yes,
things
yes.
going on, you think, oh no, that's not maybe not cool enough, or not what you have in mind.
No.
But actually, the two kind of met at a perfect point where my dad was quite up and a lot older and saying, well, what do you think the kids are into? And I was more their age than he was. And he said, well, why don't you bring in the
Yes,
artists?
they
And I
needed, he
started,
neted you to bring in the young side of
and
it.
also slave labor, like me and
Slave
my
labor,
brother.
well, there's
We
always that.
we did, and that's the other beautiful thing about it. I would come back, whether I was at university in Cape Town or wherever I was, I'd come back for the tour, and you do the box office, the
Straight to work.
security, logistics, what artist liaison, flowers in the dressing room, whatever it
Yeah,
might be.
yeah,
Which is great now because you end up knowing every job like the back of your hand,
yeah.
and
How brilliant.
um, so yeah, it was a good
Second
learning curve.
nature now.
Yeah.
So running a venture like Young Voices must come with its sort of fair share of challenges. What were the sort of biggest obstacles you faced in your early days as CEO, and how did you sort of overcome them?
Well, I think you'd have to be, pretty naive not to realize when you're dealing with 9,000 children every day that there's going to be
Oh,
problems.
can't
And
imagine what a nightmare it must be at times.
and and I think when we started it, if you had told us now all of the issues that you'd have to come up against, you probably would have been put off.
So
But
forget it.
what you have, yeah, but you have to. That's the a lot. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people putting on events would say that, because in hindsight you kind of think, wow, that's a lot to overcome. But you kind of, you make those small mistakes as you get bigger. And I think with children, certainly the kind of risk assessment and the councils and working in a school system is really difficult. But I think also it's incredibly rewarding what we do, and you've got all these parents and teachers saying how amazing these events are and how much my child got out of it. So you really do have to try and take everyone as it comes, because
Yes.
it can it can be over, just too much if you try and look
Yeah.
at the bigger picture. And when people walk in, they do see a million problems, because
Yeah. Yeah.
you could, like, how do you do that? How does that happen? How
Yeah.
does this
Yeah.
happen? But when you do it year after year, it suddenly turns into a bit of a machine. And when we go on the
Of
road, those
course.
things kind of just fall into place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is about trying to take each problem in isolation and figure them out piece by piece. Because
Yeah.
I always say to our team, if whatever business you're in, there's a kind of barriers to entry is the knowledge and the intellectual property you have. And
Yeah.
for us, it's certainly knowing that right mix of how to do things and how to make things. So every problem is another issue that if anybody tries to do what we do, they'll have to overcome too. So
Yes.
the more
Yeah.
in depth we can be about solving those problems, because we have teachers,
Yes.
parents, and children, and they all get different things out of it. So
Yeah,
you're always trying to be a kind of balancing act
I'm
in
sure.
making sure that everybody's happy.
Yeah. And so Young Voices sort of focuses on a unique and important aspect of personal growth, I suppose. What's the most sort of, have you got a heartwarming success story that you sort of witnessed that really made you think, yes, this is why I love doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we get loads of stories every year, but I'd say a few that have kind of stood out for me. One was, um, there was a girl who did a concert of ours the year the O2 opened, actually 2007. She was 8 at the time, and she did Young Voices, and then the following year her school did it again, but the choir, she wasn't picked for the choir.
No.
And so she was pretty devastated. But when she was at Young Voices, Beverly Knight performed with us. And she said it's the first moment she realized how much she loved music and she wanted to perform on stage. So anyway, this must be 5 years ago. A connection of ours through one of our dance teams said, do you know Ruti, who is in the final of The Voice on UK TV and being mentored by Tom Jones, as it happened? She was in Young Voices when she was 8 years old, and I got in touch with her. And she told me the whole story about how she wasn't picked for the choir the year later, but that was the moment where she really wanted to be a singer. So we invited her back to Young Voices to headline the following year, and we had a little interview right in the chair that she was in when she performed at Young Voices, and then she's now going onto the stage where she saw Beverly Knight perform, 15 years before, and you just think, yeah, that full
amazing.
Circle just makes you really proud. But I think also this year we had, for the first time, had two teachers in Birmingham come up to me and say, Ben, can we tell you a little story? And they said, literally 20 years ago, we were best mates in primary school and we were in this choir. And today we're both teachers and we both brought our own choirs back to Birmingham, and we didn't even realize we'd be on the same day. We're right next to each other in this choir of 6,000. And you just think, again, they were like, I kind of wanted to be a teacher so that I could come back to Young Voices every year.
That's just so lovely. It's so lovely. God, it must be such an enormous thrill for these children performing in these huge, on a huge stage like the O2. I mean, just what an opportunity.
Well, we say when you talk about kind of that personal growth, you just think if you're 9, 10 years old and you're there with all your friends and you walk out at the end of the night and you think, we just played the O2, sold out O2. And so you can never take that away from them. And I think they kind of wear it as a badge of honor, and that sense of pride it'll get you a long way, because you end up thinking, well, what am I going to do next? And it might have nothing to do with music. We always say we're not here to try and produce the next singer or anything like. It's just about trying to give those elements.
Like do anything after that, I would have thought. I mean, the confidence after that, amazing. How can sorry, I was sort of working this out. Parents, so if parents want to get their children involved in this Young Voices, does it have to be the school?
Yes, so the school is the one.
It's got to be the school.
It does have to be the school, but as I say to a lot of my friends whose children are now taking part, which I find out every year, because they say, you're never going to believe this, my child's doing Young Voices. I said,
yes.
Well, there's roughly the same amount of people doing Young Voices as go to Glastonbury, so I can believe
it's like, not that surprised.
But I always act really surprised.
Yes,
about it. But they, for a lot of them, they might be on the PTA, or they might be on the kind of music board or governance in their school, and certainly a bit of gentle persuasion from parents goes a long way in schools, because I think a lot of music teachers maybe don't know about it, and that's the big thing I have, is I meet a lot of people and they're like, how have I not heard about this? But unless you're a primary school music teacher or in a primary school, or a parent who's had somebody in your family be involved, it's often something, because we don't really advertise direct.
No. But actually, once they've heard about it, you're mad not to want to do it, actually.
Yeah.
For your school.
Well, I'm biased, but
everyone wants to be involved, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So Ben, balancing sort of work and chilling out a bit is obviously very important, especially for entrepreneurs like you. How do you sort of personally unwind and recharge after a sort of busy day or a busy week?
Well, I think certainly the music industry has become, there's been a massive shift, because it is one of those industries which mental health is really not being looked after. And when you talk to artists or on tour, but everybody from musicians to the sound and light guys, it's quite a tough industry to be in, especially because when you finish a show, you can't really switch off and go straight to bed.
No,
You're like,
no,
yeah,
buzzing.
so you have to try and wind down. And so definitely more kind of mechanisms to do that these days, and I think people are talking about it more openly. I think certainly for myself, I meditate quite a lot at the
Okay,
end of the
yeah,
day to try and draw a line, because again with events and all of that stuff, you just always have a million little things. I always say, yeah, events are all there's never one massive crisis. It's always
loads
a
of mini ones
death
everywhere.
by a thousand cuts and another thing and another thing. So you have to put those to the side if you want to be able to go to sleep and you want to be able
Mm.
to rest. And then in general, other things. I mean, yes, it's music, but I go to a lot of gigs, and generally because I'm putting on children's choir concerts, a lot of the gigs I go to, I'm a member at Ronnie Scott's and things like that. So I go to gigs that don't necessarily overlap very much with
No,
children's music. So
yes,
those are and as I said, I'm a vinyl collector. So
yeah,
putting on a record and
yeah,
closing my eyes and chilling out are
yeah,
probably the things I'd say.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's important. I hear you're a big, obviously you're a big music fan of sort of different music genres. Can you tell us what music and artists you love
Yeah, I
in
mean,
particular?
as I said, I'm a Ronnie Scott's member, so jazz. I love. There's a load of jazz and soul. I actually went last week, and it was a live drum and bass concert with the DJ Goldie was playing with
Oh,
a live
brilliant.
band doing live drum and bass, which was amazing. And then I went to a festival this year down in Dorset. It was a BBC DJ called Giles Peterson, who has a Radio 6, and it was 50 years of hip hop, 30 years of drum and bass, but lots of soul, jazz,
Yeah,
um, headlined by Ezra Collective, who are a big live jazz group who were
yeah,
incredible. Yeah, I kind of, yeah, and
there's
in terms of my
lots.
vinyl, I kind of collect everything,
Yeah.
which, as you can imagine, my wife is a bit like, well, how do we manage the kind of vinyl in the house? But yeah, we
Yes,
seem
I bet
there's always a
is
place.
it overflowing?
A little
Yeah.
bit. But I try to cull it every few
Yes.
years to
Yeah,
see
no,
if I
it's
can
hard
keep it
though,
in
isn't
check. It's
it?
very difficult.
And can you sort of tell us a tip? What would be your typical day in your role?
Well, I think ever since pandemic, there are a lot more Zooms. So I certainly have, but I try to keep them to a minimum. I still quite like old-fashioned calls rather than Zooms for especially for one-on-ones.
Yeah.
I think we get into that Zoom mentality, and it feels to me like it's a bit more agenda based.
Yes.
I like going out for meetings. I like seeing people,
It's better
out
seeing
and
people, isn't it? Face to face
yeah,
probably is definitely, you can sort of get more of a feel, I think, for.
totally. So my days are usually going and visiting venues and meeting up with people, having interesting conversations, whether it's artists or music or venues. And I travel a lot because we do Young Voices in the UK and in America. So we do the East Coast of the States, so kind of
Yes.
New York, New Jersey,
Yeah.
Philadelphia, Boston area. And that's, I mean, unbelievable. I find being able to do Young Voices in different countries such a kind of privilege, and
Amazing.
being able to see this kind of concept be performed in a city which has an amazing music culture of its own, but they're
Yes.
singing their songs. And when we did it in Germany, it was in German. When we did it in South Africa, it was Zulu and Xhosa, and
Yeah.
lots of different languages. And but fundamentally the feeling is always the same.
Same. Yeah.
Children love performing,
Yeah.
parents love seeing their children perform, but just seeing the cultural elements come
Yes.
together. I mean, somewhere like New
Very
Jersey and
special.
in the States, you just, as soon as it was our first concert, and when you think going in there, you go New Jersey and you think Bon Jovi, Springsteen, Frankie Valli, Whitney Houston,
Yeah.
they're all from New Jersey, and you just
Yes.
can't believe how many cities and states in America with all this kind of rich musical history.
Yes.
It's really lovely to be a part of.
Oh, that's so good. And how do you sort of keep up with the latest trends and ensure that young voices are sort of remains relevant?
Yeah, well, I've got a good team.
Yeah.
I think you know the most important thing is to not try and do everything from your own. You know, I have this vision of what Young Voices is, but the reality is music, especially musically now. When you look at Spotify, and you think back to, I think back to like my grandparents, and they'd have like an artist, and even my dad, when he was a child, it was like Elvis, or
Yeah.
there's like Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley. Yeah, there were people that kind of had a whole genre to themselves. Whereas I think now there are so many subgenres, so much going on out there that you have to have a lot of different lines
Yeah, of
going in the water to hear
course.
about all of these different things, because there's no way you can do it on your own. So
No.
we've got a great team, and also listening to our teachers is the
Yeah.
big one, because again, when we started this, it was 27 years ago. I now go into our choir as I did back then when I was 15 or 16. You now go and you're like, wow, the teachers are young. You're like,
Yes, I know.
no, they're not. It's just you that's getting old.
Oh,
You
it's
kind of think
just, oh dear, yeah.
it's pretty amazing. But they know their children as well, and they talk to them. What are you listening to? What's
Yes.
happening? So I think even this year, you think there are things that come around again. So we're doing the Matilda musical
Yeah.
medley for this year, and obviously Tim Minchin wrote all of the music, but there's been a West End play, but the Netflix film has come out, so it's got to kind
Yes.
of
Yes. It's always
re-energized
something.
in that
Yeah.
again. And then there's the kind of new Disney stuff that comes out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Of
so yeah,
course.
we always try and balance, I think, the kind of contemporary with traditional, because
Yes.
again, the parents are going to be coming to the show,
Yes. They
and
need to
also
like it.
they need to like it, but they also need to be able to engage with their children at home. And I think when children come back and go, oh, last year we did like a Nile Rodgers medley, and all these children are coming back with Sister Sledge and Chic and all these disco
Yeah.
classics, and the mums are like,
Parents like, yeah,
I know
yeah.
all of these,
Word for
it's
word.
great. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great to make that connection through
Yeah.
the kind of
Really,
generations musically.
really good. Have you sort of, what are your most memorable, I don't know, collaborations that you sort of that have added a new dimension to Young Voices?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, I mean, we've got certainly our dance troupe that we brought in about 10 years ago, who are kind of a street dance team, who are amazing. And I think when we started out, dance, we knew we wanted to do dance, but it was like, is it traditional? Is it
Yeah.
certain kind of stage performers? And then when they came on board, certainly for the children, they were like eyes popping out their heads, because obviously now like diversity and all the other dance teams that are out there. But when we brought them on board, break dancing and all of that stuff wasn't really in schools, and that added a real element to what we did. And then about probably 6 or 7 years ago, I had a world champion beatboxer that came on tour. And since then, we brought back beatboxers. And last year, actually, we had the world beatbox champions. And I think for
Lovely.
a 8 or 9 year old to see beatboxing live is incredible
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway. But when you're 8 or 9 and have never seen it on that scale, it kind of blows your mind. So I love adding things like that in, that
Yeah.
you yeah, I'm amazed at seeing it, and I kind of think,
Yes.
well,
Let
if
alone
I'm
an
amazed,
eight,
yeah,
9-year-old. And what would your sort of dream collaboration? Have you got a sort of dream collaboration that you sort of is on your list? You're thinking, yeah, that would be just really brilliant.
well, funnily enough, I kind of think that it's difficult, because on a personal level, my music taste, but
Yeah.
what I think, it's always trying to find that balance. And I also think that we've had some quite famous people be on tour with us, like Tony Hadley from Spandau Ballet and Catherine Jenkins and people like that. But actually, trying to find something that's really unique. And I think actually this year, one of my true collaborations was to have Tim Minchin involved, and doing Matilda this year, and him obviously produced all the music. Where we're
Yes.
talking at the moment about the possibility of him being involved more to do some videos for the children and those types
Yeah.
of things, because from my point of view, the artist side and the music side is, you really want songwriters and where music comes from, the value of music to be highlighted. I think that's one of the big things that we do is we highlight the writers and the performers, because now again Spotify and things like that, you don't even know who sings the songs these days. It's just,
Oh,
there's
no,
a
you
playlist
don't.
play, and I think everybody knows Roald Dahl wrote Matilda, but they might not know where the songs come from. And I
No,
think
no.
to me, songwriting is like alchemy. You create something out of nothing, and then suddenly the whole
Yeah,
world is singing it. It's an amazing gift
it
to
is
be
an
able to do
amazing
that. So
gift.
to be able to highlight those people. So hopefully, yeah, I don't know what we're going to be doing with Tim, but hopefully it's exciting.
And so have you, was there sort of, have you ever had any, well, obviously COVID was a pretty big setback. I was going to say a setback that you encountered while growing Young Voices, and sort of any lessons you learnt from it. I mean, COVID must have been pretty
I mean,
problematic
COVID,
for everybody, but
yeah, I think for
how
us,
did it hit?
when I talk to people about it, certainly if you drew the Venn diagram, especially at the start of it, because singing was like there
Oh
was
God,
this
of course, because you're
whole thing about singing,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
exactly,
bad.
spraying your
Yeah.
particles. And then, obviously, however we feel about kind of vaccinated, unvaccinated children,
Of
and then you
course.
had and then you had massed events. So we were all of those three things. We
Yeah.
were the point in the Venn diagram right in the middle. So
Like, no.
no, this is not happening for a long time.
God.
We knew pretty early on. So it was really hard. However, looking back on it now, I think it was one of the most amazing times for us as an organization, because again, putting on events, as soon as we finish in January, February, our UK events, we're thinking about our June events in America, and you just don't ever stop.
No.
And I think what the pandemic gave us was, they always say, you can't really fix the plane while it's in the air. Well,
No.
for us, suddenly the planes were grounded, and we were like, right, what are the problems that
Maintenance time.
we're not fixing every year, and we're just doing the best we can because we have another show to do. And it gave us time to really be
Yeah.
philosophical about things. And I think now we've come roaring back, because I think also people have missed those moments.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's when you go to Hyde Park, or you go to these they're all sold out. I mean, ticket prices these days, wow.
Oh, yeah.
But people still pay, because ultimately we almost forgot how important those moments were for
Yeah.
us, and that when they came back, I think we value them more than ever. So yeah, I think you have, and I've always tried to be philosophical in the way we've looked at what we do. And COVID was no different. It was like, how can you find the positives here? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Every cloud has a silver lining, sort of.
yeah, yeah.
So what have you got a piece of advice you could give to, I don't know, an aspiring entrepreneur, who's looking to make a positive impact with their ventures? Any sort of valuable?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, just looking at our own journey, Young Voices wasn't a thing. We kind of dreamt it up out of a kind of asking why is primary school music like this? Why can't it be a bit
Yes.
more like this? And what is there on offer? Why isn't this happening? I would say to the kind of young aspiring entrepreneurs that, first of all, those jobs of the future, and those things that they say kind of 80% of the jobs, haven't even been thought up yet, 20 years into the future. So
Yeah.
if you think about it from a young person's point of view, ask what's missing, what are the things that I want to see that aren't there at the moment, and
Yeah.
ask why isn't this happening, or why isn't that
Yes.
happening? And if you
Yeah.
don't get good enough answers, because there are some things that are just, there's a reason why they don't happen.
Yes.
Too expensive, too much hard work,
Yeah.
probably like ours was. But if you don't get the right answers, then push yourself forward and find that niche.
Yeah.
Ask that question and say,
Yes.
why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
And if you and I talked about songwriters earlier. A lot of songwriters write because there isn't a song that is telling their story.
No.
And that's why people write novels. They're like, well, I can't get the books I want, so they write them
I'll do it.
themselves. And I think that's what entrepreneurship's about. It's like,
Yes.
what are the ideas that I have, And if there's no good reason why somebody isn't doing them, I'm going to do them myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Ben, so do you have, just to sort of finish off, do you have any sort of exciting up and coming developments,
Well,
events
yeah,
you want to share with us, or?
well, yeah, we are. I mean, the kind of global expansion is the kind of the big thing that we're working on at the moment, and we're talking to Stockholm and Dubai, and actually one of the most recent kind of elements that happened in January. We had a girls' choir from Saudi Arabia
Wow.
come to perform with us at the O2, which was a real eye opener in terms of what's going on there. And because I wasn't really up to speed on what was happening culturally, but the fact that a girls' choir flew over to the UK and performed with us, and we talked to them about it and what's happening there in terms of that kind of cultural transformation. And I guess from my side, the whole thing about Young Voices is every child should get this opportunity, whether you're musical or not, whether you can sing or not. Like, you deserve to have music in your life. I mean, I'm not a great singer, and I'm from Wales, which is
You would have wanted me.
doubly bad. But music is a part of all of our
Yes.
lives, and that's trying to give that to children everywhere is really important to me. So
Yeah,
seeing schools fly in from around the world just kind of tell me that there is that possibility of taking it to countries around the world and having those elements. So certainly America, growing America, because at the moment we're just on the East Coast, and I'd love to spread that far and wide, and more concerts in more parts of the world.
And can I just ask, probably a silly question, can we, if we haven't got children performing in these choirs, can anyone book a ticket?
Great, no, just because it's
okay.
because
no,
it,
I
because
just
it,
wondered.
you could certainly come down. I'd definitely invite you.
Oh,
But
that's very kind.
but it's in
But
terms of
yes, it's for parents.
it's for the parents, and we sell out, and
When you've got so many children, there's just no room, is there? Of course.
Exactly. And we kind of feel that if you're denying a place to a parent because you're selling it publicly, and you just don't have the same connection.
You can't do that. It's a stupid question, actually.
If your child is in that choir, it's like you will give anything to make sure you're there for their big night. So.
Yeah. No, of course. And can you see yourself doing this in years to come?
I hope so. I mean,
Yes.
I'm quite self-aware that maybe there will be a point where I'm out of touch or whatever from that point of view. But as part of that kind of my dad and us starting it, and I feel a kind of duty of stewardship of trying to. But I think if you grow and if it's in different countries, there will certainly be other people that have to run it, and your time.
Yes.
But it's so much fun and so rewarding that in whatever way that I can be involved. When people say, "Oh, do you that kind of business? Have you got an exit plan?" I'm like, not really.
No, you don't want one. You don't. You love it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's full of so much variety as well. You're not just doing one single thing, and you're meeting fascinating people, and it's exciting, and I mean, and rewarding, and
yeah. And I kind of feel we're still even though we're 27 years in, we're kind of at the beginning. There's so much opportunity, and music education is changing so much in this country, but around the world, and different offerings, and working with the music industry as well, because I have a big bugbear that the music industry isn't more involved with music education, whereas sports, which gives you a lot of the same, that kind of teamwork, resilience. I think Sport England and those elements are really involved in education and grassroots football or cricket or whatever it might be. Whereas with music, we don't have those links, and I think there's a real opportunity there. So maybe that's where my world will go, to try and make those kind of structural elements happen a bit more.
Oh, Ben, thank you so much. That was really fascinating.
Thank you.
To hear from you, and good luck for the future and your upcoming. So your next one's a January, February, I guess.
Next one's exactly. So
just one quick question: how far in advance do you send over all the sort of music and whatever that all the teachers have to
So June,
Have to
July, we
teach
usually
children.
send our music
Okay.
packs out so that the teachers, and this is the kind of historical thing, they love to have them over the summer holidays, kind of make their notes like, oh, how am I going to
Okay.
teach? They get really, it's kind of their iPhone moment. The music pack turns up, they're like, what's in the repertoire this year?
Yes.
You know,
Okay.
everybody gets
So,
very excited about all of
cool.
that. So, and who are the special guests and all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So,
I
yeah,
guess that they can then crack on in September.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you, Ben, so
Thanks,
much.
Panda. It said stopped on my